Hello, everybody. Welcome back from the summer. To those of you who've been having that, me at least, I've just been off a few weeks. So if I'm a bit rusty today, that might be some of the reason. But it's nice to be back here with another live session. Today we have Mark joining because he wrote a book that kind of stopped my thumb from from scrolling through LinkedIn, and it's I think you saw in the event name that is called "Your Data is Fucked" for marketers, which I think anybody in marketing can relate to. I have made so many mistakes trusting data too much or too little in my career, so that title really struck me. But Mark, maybe you can just like run the kind of the quick intro to who you are and what's your like, how do you get into this topic, and maybe explain why you needed to write a book called this thing.
Okay. Well, I think I'll kind of start a little bit about where I started with all this. So I worked in London when I started my career. Did that for just under a year. I found that it was, I don't know, a struggle, and I'd already lived in Australia before, and we had some people, friends that had lived in New Zealand. So we moved to New Zealand kind of abruptly, and I started a job or an agency in New Zealand. And within that company, I was an account manager, and I kind of felt firsthand what it was like to have the frustrations of the data just never being right. So I was trying to report to my clients, and I'd have a big presentation come up, and I'd go in and check it, and it wouldn't be right, or something would look weird, and it was just so frustrating. So I then tried to go down the route of getting that data tracked. So getting those websites tracked, those campaigns tracked in the way I needed those to be tracked. And then I started to discover that this was a bit more of a problem. So either working with the client's developers or working with our own internal developers, I often found there was this kind of disconnect, and I kind of felt that developers get into web development and web design because they want to build cool apps and websites. They don't really want to do analytics. They don't want to put Google Tag Manager on a website. It's not why they wake up in the morning. So I would often go to the client's developer or our developer and say, look, I really want to do this. We need e-commerce tracking. We want micro event tracking. We want audiences. We want all these kind of cool things that GA3 could do. And then I'd always get resistance. And then I'd find, and someone would say, no, we can't do that. It's too expensive, or take too long, or there'd be some kind of problem. And then so I really felt that maybe I'm just asking the question the wrong way. So I started doing a bit of learning myself, skilling myself up.
Yeah.
And I got to the point where I could ask good questions, and I could say, look, I want to do this. This is how I want to do it. Is that okay? And then they would say, no, you can't do that.
Yeah.
And I'd go, no, you can do it. You can do it this way. And I'd send them the blog. And then they go, oh, you then do it that way. Okay, yeah, we can do that. And then I started to make a bit of progress. And then I started really enjoying it. I don't know why. There was something about it. I mean, some of the things I'd experienced previously would be, the highest paid person's opinion in the room is the way that you go. And this just seemed like a bit of a breath of fresh air.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how I got into it. And then the agency I worked for, I kind of built up a bit of a mini department within that agency.
Ah, cool.
And then that agency, they were super cool. And I said, look, I really want to take this further. And that agency then became my first client. And then I started opening up shop for other agencies and for other clients directly. I built a bit of a team. And then I built that team up. We got some bigger clients. We started looking at wider tools such as customer data platforms, which I'm sure you're very familiar with, obviously. Even started to go into the dark, misty realms of Adobe Analytics as well, which is a completely different beast. And then, so I'm getting to the point eventually.
Yeah.
And then we were approached by another agency that was just looking, this is kind of 6 years later, now agencies are starting to realize that this is a big thing that we need to do. And they're all building their own departments. And so I was approached by another agency. They're a really cool agency, really nice people, really good to their clients and really good to their people, which is great. And they just said, hey, we'd like to acquire your company. So the company was acquired. I spent a year as their head of analytics, kind of on with that transition. And then before I knew it, 10 years had passed. And it was, we kind of felt we had kids, or we have kids, sorry. We felt it was time to come home. And so in that transition period, I was like, well, a lot's happened. And so I just felt that it was something I wanted to do. And I started off with the idea that people said, what are you going to do? And I said, I don't really know. I've got this idea to write a textbook because I started with that route because I wanted something that I could use for myself that would remind me of all the things that I've forgotten, and I could pull out and I could use it and I could kind of reflect on, I could make a framework and all the cool things that I picked up and learned and really agreed with. And I immediately thought textbook was the way to go. I sat down and started trying to write a textbook and I thought, this is so boring. There's no way I'm going to finish this. So I then I just thought, fuck it. I'll just write what I would like to pick up, what I find interesting, and I'll have fun doing it. And I also hope that by presenting it in this way, more people would actually read it. So like you said, I was scrolling down, and that's what we all do. There's so much information, so much out there. I thought that, well, I had already seen titles with a similar kind of vibe. I think there's like a self-help kind of book out there, which is called Everything's Fucked or something. And that's a big book. So I thought, well, it's been done before. So I mean, it can't be that big a deal. So I'll just do it. Why not? It'll be fun. I'll see what happens. That's kind of where I'm at, really. At that point, that was kind of the story of how it came together and put that together. Yeah.
Super nice. And what would be kind of the like tangible examples that would kind of make it fair to say that marketers and the relationship to data is a bit fucked sometimes? I'm sure you've seen like during an agency for 10 years, you've probably seen a lot of different situations where this goes.
Yeah, because I mean, like really, we're only called often when it's a bit too late.
Yeah.
So we're like, the agency or the company, they've probably tried to do this themselves first, or they've forgotten to do it, and then there's a phone call that says, hey, can you help? Like, and there's a bit that kind of firefighting mode. And so really every time, a campaign goes live and there's no tracking, or a new website goes live and there's no tracking, and someone suddenly goes, look, we're about to do a presentation to the board, and we're gonna talk to them, or we're gonna talk to some of our investors or whoever, and we want to report back to them and say like how this went, and then they go, oh crap, we don't have, either we don't have the data, or we're not really sure what data to use, or we don't have the right report. Or I think that's probably the most tragic thing when that happens, because at that point, if the tracking has been put in the first place, then there's not really much you can do. If you haven't collected the data, then you can't really magic it out of nowhere. But it's generally it's either campaigns, channels going live, or it's the website going live, and it's an afterthought.
Yeah, and like just to spell it out, what are kind of the consequences then when stuff like tracking it doesn't leave a trace behind?
Oh well, I guess like, so you don't know, you can't really make improvements, because if you don't set down that benchmark before you go to do something, set the tracking up then, all agree how you're going to measure success, and then you go to do it, and then you go back and say, hey, did we do something right? Yeah, there's no benchmark. There's nothing to compare back to. Like, how do you know? Like, and the other thing is also, even if it didn't work, that's okay too. As long as you didn't spend too much of the budget on it, or everything wasn't, riding on it. But even if it didn't work, like, how are you going to get any of those learnings and say, hey, it didn't quite work this time, but we've gone through the reports and the data, and we've come up with these insights, and this is what we're going to do next time. Like, there's no it's just this not all companies are the same, obviously, but there just seems to be this circle, this repeating circle of not remembering and not learning from what's happened previously.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that's making it even more difficult now is so many people are changing their jobs, and so you'll be working on an account, and you would have come in as the new person supporting someone who's left, and then you go to work with the client, and then the person who previously worked on the analytics and the tracking, that they've gone to, and then there's some new person to come in, but they're only going to be here for 6 months. And then so it's just this one of the concepts in the book, one of the models is, it's not my model, it's just it's a version of one of these models that I like to use, the analytics maturity curve. There's this constant, I feel like at the moment more now than ever, with GA3 coming at, with GA3 being replaced by GA4, there's this kind of constant slide back down the analytics maturity curve, because people are moving around, there's new tools, there's this ongoing relearning.
That probably that's probably a good what's it called, a good plug over to kind of what other than in the book besides the statement of being fucked. So I know it's built around frameworks of how to think about analytics. Now, how many did you have here? Is it 6 you wrote?
There's a bunch of frameworks. Some of them are mine, some of them ones I've borrowed from other people more intelligent than me. And there's a whole bunch of metaphors that I put in there as well, which I also love. Anything that can help me understand something more, explain something in a way that people will actually get and resonate to, and just makes this all a bit more interesting, because it can easily turn into something dry, and if it becomes something dry, then there'll be no progress will be made. So there's a few of them.
I can I can put them in the chat section here. And the first one you named was this kind of the analytics maturity curve, and maybe you can drill a little bit deeper into that one as a
So that's always my favorite thing to start with, because it helps set the context. So there's this. So in terms of the actual analytics maturity curve, there's 5 key areas that I think that a client should work through, or at least know that are there, because it might be for that, say it's a small company and they don't really have the budget to invest into, say, personalization or CRMs, or it's kind of online, it isn't as important for them, then maybe they don't even need to go all the way to stage 5. But the whole point there is that there's 5 stages. There's one, effectively starting with your basic web metrics. Do we even trust this data? And then it builds all the way up to, are we working with KPIs and targets? Do we have reporting that we understand with clear insights? And then there's a bit of gap in the middle between 3rd and the 4th, which is the gap, which I think is where you have to move past siloed tools like web analytics, Google Analytics, and you have to start bringing in customer data platforms and other sources of data before you can kind of progress. And so it makes a bit of a big gap there in the middle, because it can take more investment. It takes more different skills within your team. And then the final stage would be kind of 5. And then probably with all this AI stuff, I should add a 6th one on and call it the AI stage.
That's the second edition of the book then.
But the first 4, so 1 to 4, it's all kind of looking back, like what happened. And then the 5th is starting to make predictions and looking forward. And then the idea is you go, okay, so this is it. This is roughly what happens on each. If you can do these things on each level, this is kind of roughly where you are. And a really good question is to go like, where do you think you currently are on that model? And where do you want to be in 2 years? Where do you want to be in 6 months? And then what does it take to get there? And that's a really good way to kind of start the conversation.
And I guess it's also to say that not all companies need to be a 5 on the maturity curve if you've just started a new consultant business.
But the important thing is to have that conversation and say, look, we don't think we need to go all the way to level 5. We don't at the moment. We don't think we need predictive analytics at the moment.
No.
We just need to have data that we understand. But it's getting everybody in the same room and agreeing where you are at the moment and where you want to be. And then that can help you make some of those decisions around where you might invest your resources into, what skills you might bring onto your team, and what tools you might use. And whether, do we go out and buy an expensive tool or not? Well, if we're not planning to progress that much further, then maybe we don't need that tool.
Do you think are companies in general good at self-diagnosing, or could they?
Well, I guess I've got a warped sample, really. I think. I mean, normally the companies that are good at self-diagnosing probably don't call me in because we're already, they're sorted, they have everything worked out, and then the companies that aren't are the ones that call me in to help. So I think generally I've seen lots of examples of kind of expensive projects that haven't gone anywhere. And that's kind of really disappointing. And it was one, obviously I won't say names or anything like that, but there was one where they had effectively they'd spent hundreds of thousands of dollars into a DMP, like data management platform. And this was before the cookie issues, and still it wasn't really being used to anywhere near its capability. And so but nobody really understood how they were then supposed to use it, and just this big expensive cost sits there. Then you have a conversation, and then part of that conversation is, I'm sorry, but we don't have any budget to set up GA3, and it's just like, okay.
I think that's always the risk with a lot of these technology purchases, that there's motivation and there's motivation for the vision, but then when it comes to actually doing stuff, then sometimes it's not really followed through always.
So there is one. So I know I'm going to wind you up a little bit here, Stephen, because I know you haven't read the book. But there's one in there that's the pillars of personalization. So that's one that I did come up with myself when I was trying to. So let's say a client comes on board and they're looking to kind of mature up the analytics maturity curve. Like they want to get from level 3 to level 4. They want to cross the gap. A good way to do that would be to put together a project plan, to say this is what we want to be able to achieve in 12 months. These are all the people that are going to kind of come on board. Another good way to do that would be to have a measurement plan to say this is exactly specifically what we're going to be tracking and what data points we need, what variables we might need, and then we have a solution design, and that's a nice visual for everybody to say these are the different things that come together. But whether or not that is all going to work, we kind of need to talk about some of the key pillars. So the first one is that concept of analytics maturity, where we are on the scale. The second one is the tools. What tools do we currently have and what tools do we need? And then the third one would be data as a resource. So what actual data do we have to work with? So I've got a silly metaphor in there about it being like a Ferrari. There's no point having like an amazing Ferrari, which might be like a really expensive MarTech stack, if you've got no analytics maturity, digital maturity, because you're just going to turn the thing and crash into a wall. That's the driver. And then if you don't have any of the data to put into this thing to make it work, then you're not going anywhere, and that's the fuel. So those three things would be the three pillars. Then
just repeat the pillars.
So data maturity, tools, and then so digital maturity, tools, and then data resource. Okay. And then the foundations, it's got to come from the foundations, which are your marketing, your business strategy, which leads to your marketing strategy. Work your way up to the top, which is your data strategy, which then helps you decide what your personalization strategy would be. So we've got all this stuff together. What do we actually want to do with it? And let's only pick a few. Let's not just say that we want to do a whole bunch of different personalization strategies.
Could you give some examples of what a personalization strategy is when you do them?
So there's so we've got that wheel of growth. Well, I don't know why I keep saying we, because it's just me at the moment, but I've got that wheel of growth. And the whole idea was to answer that question is, okay, well, where do we want to go with this? for this organization, based on their business strategy, their marketing strategy, and those 3 pillars, like what should we actually try to do? And so this wheel of growth, the idea is that the overall direction is growth, but there's different ways to do that. So I think in that wheel, there's something like 20 different personalization strategies, the most common ones that you could invest in. And then it's about like, which ones do we choose? So the first one would be just syndication. So the first one would be like, we've got all these different data sources. We want to be able to syndicate in a way that we have a federated ID, which effectively means that we're able to kind of draw these different user points together in like one user, which we can then say, this is Jeff Bloggs. And the very first attribute that we know about Jeff Bloggs is that he has given permission that we can use his data. And then you build attributes from there. But then the really exciting stuff that everybody wants to hear about, which is what sells in a presentation would be, we want to be able to onboard our new users with perfect personalized messaging all the way through. Or we want to have really clear personalized channels across all of our different sources. So like we're saying the right thing to the right customer at exactly the right time all the way through that purchase journey and things like that. But it's generally starting off first with that first bit. That can we bring this down to one user, and can we trust that we've actually got permission to use that data?
And then you use it when you send emails and when you onboard people to different things and all that. Cool. So that's analytics maturity curve and the pillars of personalization. The wheel of growth is that was kind of that
was the wheel.
Things. Then the next one on the list is the risk and readiness review.
That's another good one. So that's more of a workshop. So the idea with that is, so I wanted to make this tangible for people, so give them a way that they could try to do some of this stuff themselves. And so I shared the risk and readiness review, which is a workshop, and that's where we bring as many people into the room that we can across the business, like different silos, and we try to work out what are the current opportunities and threats across those 3 pillars. So we say, we ask the developers, questions around what data can we use as a resource. We ask the marketers, how confident do you currently feel in our existing tool stack? And we get those conversations happening in one place, because none of this is going to work if we all work in silos. And so what comes out of that is we end up with a report card that says, this is how ready we think we are across those 3 pillars, and this is the level of risk that we think we might have. And risk can be, this is the risk potentially going forward if we do this, but more often than not, it's like, this is the risk that happens if we don't do this. And that can be the opportunity cost of not doing it, not offering a more personalized service. And the second thing could be, say, the oncoming, the risk of having a strategy that's built on third-party cookies. We're heavily invested in DMPs, and the DMPs that we have, they haven't made much room to prepare us for the fact that I think the new date for the death of Chrome cookies, I think that's second half of 2024, which it was 23. Just keep pushing it back a little bit. So that's the kind of the workshop, which there should be enough information there that teams can kind of use that to get together and start the conversation.
What would be the inflection point for calling to this kind of data risk and readiness review?
I guess someone just saying, like, can we please just sort this out? I guess it's just having, it's got to come from the top, really. People within the organization can send the messages through and say, hey, look, we need help. We want to start driving this forward and having a strategy. But it really has to come from the business strategy through to the marketing strategy, and then the will of people within the company to start taking it seriously and say, okay, well, let's start with a workshop. Let's start with or even that, let's start with a conversation. You know, how we might do this.
So it's like organization that feels kind of prohibited or
and just knows that they're not quite getting there. They don't know why. And it's really like it can almost be seen as like an internal focus group of just, and I think that's a good way to see it too, because it means that people feel more comfortable about talking, sharing their opinions, and as long as it's kind of in the way of we're just saying, hey, we're just trying to collect all this information together, so everybody can be heard, and so we can get all these points together and kind of put together a summary or that can help decide what we should do.
And then the last framework is the reporting and dashboarding strategy.
So that was a big part of the book as well, because a lot of what I've done during my career has been creating reports for people and dashboards for people, or working with teams that are doing that. And like that's one of the things that just always is the most treacherous in terms of actually being able to create a report and a dashboard that everybody's happy with. And I assumed it wasn't just me. And so
everybody has opinions about dashboards,
and everybody does. And so I kind of wanted to go back to, well, let's try and put all those, let's see this more as a formula, and let's go, everybody's got opinions about dashboards and reporting. Let's break it down. Okay, what's the difference between a report? What's the difference between a dashboard? Do we even agree about that? Because often we don't. Often someone will say they want a report, but they actually mean that they want a dashboard. And someone will say, have you done the reporting? But they don't want a report, they want a dashboard, or vice versa. It can get muddled. And then so I wanted to do it as well when I was kind of looking into this, and that's where I found a lot of Avinash's work really helpful, and you'll see connections to his work in there for sure. And I've quoted him. I wanted to try and put together some of those variables and say, well, what reports and dashboards are most suited for what people within the organization? What levels of information should they have based on their ability to kind of their time and ability to interpret this? And then what are the variables along that kind of helps put that together? So some of the key things are, how accurate does the information have to be right now? So like going into Google Analytics and just pulling up any report, or going straight to the raw data, that's likely to be the least accurate of all your data. And on the other side of that is a edited, thought about, proofread report that's delivered to someone. So accuracy is really important, and in the middle can be like a self-service dashboard, but only people that are trained in how to use that dashboard and are trained in how to kind of interpret the findings should have access to that too, because that can really cause problems. I know everybody's massive about self-service dashboards, and I think they definitely do have a place, but only in the right place of the scale, because that can just cause huge problems. I've heard time and time again where someone goes, this often senior person has read a self-service dashboard, taken a number, and then run around the business telling everybody this number, which is not quite right. And that might be because the self-service dashboard pulls into a data set that's only checked every 3 months. And so that's not very reliable. But it doesn't mean that there's a problem with self-service dashboards. It means that it is one of these different tools that we can use. And really, if you want to give something to someone senior who's going to make some proper decisions with it, you give them a report that's written up with the insights ready for them to use. And other things would be flexibility, I'm trying to think, accuracy, the detail. There's a few other points in there I can't remember the top of my head, but there's a section there, and then there's partly some information in there about comparing apples to apples rather than apples to pears, which is driving everybody mad at the moment. With you've got GA3 that says users, and then you've got GA4 that says users, and they're not the same.
Yeah.
Not completely the same. And GA4.
Those who doesn't know the difference, that I actually don't know the difference either. So it's,
There's different. Everybody will immediately turn off if I go into that. But one of the key things that I've seen as well is there's a component of the GA4 where the data is modeled. So trying to get around the issue of the fact that we're losing data, there can be a setting in there that you've accidentally turned on that says this is the data that we thought you were getting.
Yeah.
And so you're comparing GA3 to GA4, and sometimes suddenly your users have gone up, but they're not really actually calculated the same way because one of them includes predictive data.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I really like what you said about reports, that like data is, when it's just sitting there and then a lot of different people have different opinions about it.
Yeah.
Whereas if somebody actually writes a report and then distributes it, somebody has actually taken the time to properly interpret it, and then it sends the organization in the right direction afterwards because it's been thought through what it indicates.
Well, they've taken in all the different. Hopefully, they've taken in all the different things. Like they know that there's an issue with users. They're not just suddenly going to jump to the fact that we've just increased users 20%. Because they know the detail of, it's someone's role to know that.
Yeah.
And so it's all these kind of different things need to be taken into account when you put together a conclusion. And a big part of that is, where did the data come from? What's the history of the implementation? All kinds of things that can make things look different than what they are. Like even if you're reporting on sessions or page views going up and you didn't know that your agency is just got doubled their investment in display ads.
Yeah.
I've seen reports that say, yay, our traffic's going up, we're doing awesome.
Yeah.
And then but they didn't have all the information of like, not really, because you've just bought more traffic.
Yeah. Cool. If we are to kind of round this conversation, and particularly the book off, what are kind of the things you hope that the marketers who are now going to be reading your book is going to take away from it?
Obviously, first one is buy the book.
Yeah. Yeah. Give Mark some money,
please. And also, if you can, like add a fair review, because I'm really, really, really poor in the review fund at the moment, and the conversion rate to reviews is really bad. But then someone did ask me the other day, they said, well, have you ever written a review? And I was like, oh, no, I haven't. I should probably start doing that.
Yeah.
But probably, to round things off, I would just say, like, start having this conversation, and also measurement plans are important. Just even if it's a very basic spreadsheet that says, these are the events that we've set up, these are the conversions that we've set up, this is when they were set up, this is when they were last tested, and this is definitively what we think this event or conversion means. Even if it's just 20 rows in a spreadsheet, and then share it with everybody. That is just great. Like, just at least start with that, and then start having the conversation. When I first started down this route, I was account manager. I hadn't ever set up GA before. Don't be afraid to look stupid. Just ask questions. I think a lot of all this is marketers have to wear so many hats and have so many areas of specialization, and often I think feel like they need to pretend like they know everything, and I just think everything moves so quickly, it's impossible to know everything anyway. So just measurement plans, buy the book, put your hand up and say, I don't understand this, what can we do so at least I understand this? And like, who has access to Google Tag Manager? Who has access to GA? Like, how can we, if it's a client and a brand, how can we start owning our data? Because that will support your agency. And your own internal marketing team.
Yeah, and I guess all of it is with the purpose of trying to improve your business. Yeah,
exactly. I mean, we're not doing this just to get perfect data.
No.
It's got to have an output.
I agree. And is there any kind of one thing that they should start doing differently tomorrow?
I mean, I mean, to be honest, it really is it's a deeper set of challenges, and I'd love to be able to give you that soundbite, but I no.
Yeah. Yeah, it's different for every company. There's like multiple layers in that.
Yeah. I think just start asking questions.
Morten, he writes here that remember to leave a good review for the book.
Thank
And
you.
the next
Oh,
time,
that's cool.
Jack suggests that the next book title could be your company.
Your company. Oh, Jack, I'd love to work with you. I know Jack. He's from Australia.
Ah, nice. Cool. Mark, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us, me in particular.
Oh, it's been brilliant. Thank you for suggesting it. I've never done this before.
If people want to buy the book or to get in contact with you, what do they do?
So it's in Amazon, pretty much all the stores, all the specific country stores. There you might see an ad. There's also a flawed version of the book, so your data is flawed, and that was so I could get around Amazon's advertising rules. And if you'd like to work with me, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn, and I also have a website which is MckTui.com. So that's MckTui.com, and tui is a very strange looking New Zealand bird.
I was thinking, where does this come from? Wonderful, Mark. Have a great day, and thanks for joining.